Hey, I'm Dr. Brett, and we're back with my podcast, Open Door with Dr. Brett. I'm here with my friend and buddy, Jahmaal Hays. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate that. Hey, so you have a yoga, meditation, mindfulness background. That's not always the case. Do you consider yourself an athlete of some sort?
No,
with
I
the
don't.
yoga?
I don't consider yoga a sport. Some people do. Some in India, they do competitive yoga, just like I guess how they do with the Olympics, and they do or like gymnastics and flips and twists, and so they do stuff like that with yoga.
So there's actually a sport
There's
of yoga?
they do
I didn't even know that.
They do competitive yoga.
Do they really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Only in
now,
India.
What's amazing is you went to high school in New Delhi, right?
That's right.
What was that like? I mean, 5 years in New Delhi, right? I think it was like, what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I spent 5 years in New Delhi, and I finished. I did my last 2 years of high school there, and for the first year that I lived in India, I was homeschooled. And so it's...
How many people live in New Delhi, by the way? Is
New
it
Delhi,
like 20 million, like 15, 20 million?
Last time I checked, it was around 13.
Wow,
Yeah.
13 million people.
Yeah.
And so what was the reason you went from homeschool to the regular school? How'd that work? I assume it's international school.
Yeah, I went to an international school. My mom wanted me to go to school. I was fine being homeschooled. And a big part of that, though, is when we first moved to India, they wanted me to repeat 9th grade. And I'm a smart person. There's no need to repeat a grade. But because there's some exam that's linked between 9th and 10th grade, and like that whole 9th and 10th, the years of 9th and 10th are linked to prepare students for this exam. So they being the international school? The Indian schools wanted students to prepare for this exam, and so I would have to start over. And then after a year of homeschooling, we moved to New Delhi. We were just a little more out in the country.
Oh, you mean you started somewhere out in the countryside?
I lived down the road from the Taj Mahal for a year.
No way.
And,
I mean, that sounds pretty amazing. What's the Taj Mahal actually like, though?
It's amazing the first few times, but then, you can only see it so many times.
Right. Did you actually have guests or people that visited, and you take them to the...
Every time someone would come to visit, we go to see the Taj Mahal.
You know what's funny is I lived in San Diego for 5 years, and every time that someone would come to visit, I would go to either the zoo or SeaWorld. And you went to the Taj Mahal.
I would expect something like the seals, no?
You mean the Navy SEALs or whatever?
No, the SEALs out in the water.
Oh, the SEALs like in La Jolla Cove and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, totally. I'm like, because there's a lot of Navy, right? There's a lot of military in San Diego. So when you say SEAL, I'm thinking about Navy SEALs, right? So,
you see the SEALs training, the Navy SEALs training?
Well, you do see like the jets fly overhead at Miramar Air Force. Cool. I used to play golf at Torrey Pines Golf Course. Torrey Pines is super famous there in San Diego. And, back then it was in the 90s. It was actually $9 for 9 holes and $13 for 18 holes. Today it's it's a top end golf course, but the jets would fly overhead. Back then in the 90s, it was those F-14 Tomcats, the ones from Top Gun.
Yeah, the movie.
So pretty cool. So coming back to India and the yoga training, did you actually do yoga training in India?
Yeah, I did a couple trainings. I did one for the more traditional spiritual type of yoga, and one that was more of a power yoga. I love going to the gym. I thought about being a personal trainer for a little bit, and I don't know, the more I got into yoga, the less I started going to the gym, the less I started working out, and I just started getting
So is there like some kind of conflict between being a meathead in the gym, so to speak, and a yoga instructor, practitioner? I mean, does it take you on a different path?
I don't think
I'm being playful. I like the gym too.
I think
I'm okay with meatheads.
They each have their place, but yeah, I was a meathead. Can you believe that?
I know. I'm really shocked. I'm actually shocked by this.
No, they each have
their
place.
I don't know them that well.
But I just started getting in tune with my body on a whole other level, and I realized that my body is strong enough. I don't need to go spend time putting strain on my body when I can strengthen my body and make it more flexible at the same time with yoga. and have the entire mental practices that go with that.
Totally.
It's so powerful. I never even thought about
so
it.
you stop with the weights and everything,
Yeah.
you switch to yoga.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in San Diego, believe it or not, I'm remembering back now that we're having this talk, and I did like, I think it was Iyengar. Like it was
That's
really,
intense.
really intense yoga. Like you were holding postures for like, you know, torturous minutes and minutes and minutes.
Oh yeah,
like,
if there was,
you know,
if there would be like an orthodox, like how you have orthodox religions, that would be that version of yoga. It's the
I think I
orthodox,
did like
very, very strict.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I can't, you know, I was relatively young back then, probably your age.
Everything's based on alignment. You can't have your foot even 10 degrees off. You know, you have to be.
Oh no, yeah,
right
no,
on
the
the
instructor was like nuts and everything. So what's the distinction between like something like Iyengar and like power yoga? What is power yoga? I've never really, I've done what's his name, the Bikram stuff or whatever in the past, but
Yeah, so these are all different schools of yoga, and ultimately they all come back to controlling the mind through the body. And there's different ways of doing that. And so power yoga is more energetic, and it's more for people that are used to high intensity workouts, high intensity movements, or
now,
high
is that
intensity anything
similar
for
to
the brain.
Qigong? Because I've done, you know, Qigong, what is that? Is that the Korean version of, it's like a type of yoga in a way, like Qigong.
Qigong, kind of like Tai Chi.
Yeah.
It's
Well, Tai
it's
Chi is
Chinese.
different.
They're Chinese. They're
Qigong would be,
It's the flow of practicing the flow of energy.
right.
No, power yoga would be more like a P90 workout, and then
I always get
and then
hurt
the
when I do
traditional,
those things.
and then the traditional one would be like Qigong, nice and slow.
Yeah, because I don't remember the few. I had a friend that was a Qigong instructor, and I did a bunch of his classes years ago, and that wasn't slow really. Tai Chi can be slow, but Qigong was pretty intense too.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's about balance, and it's the inner strength, really. That's
so you said controlling the mind through the body.
right.
Can you talk more about that concept? Because
that's a huge.
Yeah, I mean, you just got a little, you know, a little deep there, which, I mean, we can go pretty deep with this one, I think. I mean, my gut says.
Yeah, we can go.
Yeah, so what do you mean by that?
So a lot of times people think that yoga is going into, you know, all these different postures, but that's how it looks on the outside. The reason why we go into these postures is to put our body into intense situations while being able to maintain our cool, while staying calm in intense situations, while maintaining our breath, maintaining control, maintaining restraint, even no matter how much you might want to move or get out of the posture or do something else. Or get out of alignment just because it's a little more comfortable if you can, you know, shift your weight a little bit. But when we can practice all the things that go with that restraint, the breath, the control, it's really taming our nervous system. And that's kind of the control of the mind through the body.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that was a beautiful way of putting it, Jahmaal. You know, you're helping me put together this series, The Fundamentals of the Mental Game. And we've been talking a lot about and doing videos on patience and poise and presence and perseverance and perspective. It sounds like you can get all of that and then some through the yoga training.
Big time.
Yeah.
The yoga is the mental game.
Totally.
Everything that we see, all the benefits that people talk about are secondary to mastering our mind, mastering ourselves.
So do you feel like you're more equipped than most? I mean, you know, it's an ego, I don't mean to make an ego-based comparison, but it's hard to communicate without some way of doing a comparison. It just is. So do you feel like you're more equipped than most because of all this background with the yoga training to handle a crisis situation, should it occur?
Definitely. And
you know, if we have an earthquake right now, am I going to be okay because you're okay?
Yeah, we'll be fine. And definitely it means I have all the tools I need available to manage stress and to manage intense situations, whether it's hurricanes.
So do you naturally go into the breath? Because this is something I talk about a lot, and most people, non-yoga people, I mean, there's a concept of yoga where, you know, people do yoga once a week or something, and it's not what you're really talking about here.
No.
You're talking about a much more, it's a way of living, right? It's a lifestyle and a way of being.
It's a way of breathing.
It's a way of breathing.
Every breath.
Yeah.
How many times a day do you breathe?
You know, not as often as I probably should. But
it's important.
Yeah, totally. It's a confrontive question. How many times a day do you breathe?
Yeah.
You know, when you read certain books, right? I think the Tibetan books or whatever it is, they talk about that concept of how many breaths you have in a lifetime, right?
Right.
Like, you know, so when you think
slow
about
down
it,
your breath, you can extend your life.
is that true, or you just get more out of the experience of living? Is it true? Do you believe in that concept that you have you're born with so many breaths?
I wouldn't say only with so many, but I will say it's a rough measurement, and for me, the way I see it, it's like a mix of breath and heart rate. So when you look at smaller animals like squirrels they're breathing really fast and their heart rate is increased, they have a shorter lifespan because they're blowing through all of these heart rate / breaths of their lifetime in a shorter span of time. Whereas like cold-blooded animals like tortoises can live for hundreds of years because they move slowly, metabolize slowly, they breathe slowly.
There's some, you know, shark species that live to almost like 400 years. I think they're like thousands of feet deep, and you know, it's cold and dark down there, so they're probably, you know, moving. My guess is it's like you said, they're moving so slow. Their movements are just
right. They're probably totally still, just moving with the ocean currents.
Yeah,
you know,
probably.
There's very minimal movements.
Yeah, totally. This is fascinating. How often do you actually practice the craft and art and the experience of yoga, and how much do you play with it? You know what I mean? Like on your own in a less formal way.
I'm always playing with yoga, and I practice every day. We can do anything with yoga and the concepts, the tools that we have in yoga.
We're getting interrupted here right now. My wife is coming in, and the dog is about to bark, but we're going to keep this thing going. So say it again. Say that again one more time. So you're always playing with it on some level, right?
Yeah, yoga is meant to be broken out of. So we start off with a set of guidelines and almost a set of restrictions, but then we move beyond that because we know that yoga itself is just another system that we have to recognize that it's another system. We can't just go with what we're told or with dogma. We have to be ultimately in life, be present and aware and open to all new experiences.
You know, I found that the Bikram, I wasn't attracted to Bikram. You know, some people love it, the power, you know, the sweating, the heat, the temperature. But it felt like, for me, a little militaristic. It felt a little bit more regimented. Maybe Iyengar was too a long time ago,
definitely.
but I can't remember that so much. I was younger.
They can feel like I said, more orthodox, maybe more militant.
Yeah, and I'm sort of
very structured.
Like I like the more freedom. Like I'm wired more freedom oriented. It sounds like you're putting that mix together.
You have to find the balance because you need some kind of structure, but then you do want to have fun and have free flow. You don't want to hate your practice, like a diet. You know, you don't want to. You want to have a good diet, but you don't want to feel like you're locked in a cage. With your food choices.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, that's a good metaphor. What, you know, do you feel like you have more freedom in your life than, you know, because of all this practice, so to speak? You know, the physical that you're now doing the mental, emotional, and spiritual out of this physical practice. Do you feel freer in some ways?
I don't freer than what?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, like, they struggle with the sense of freedom. They feel like, you know, they don't have a lot of freedom on their life, whether they're working for a boss or because freedom is both internal and external, right? It's like you're working for somebody, but if you have an amazing attitude and your boss is a jerk, then you could still feel a little freer than the next guy or the next woman that doesn't, you know what I mean, that can't process the world that way. So, I mean, is there an emotional freedom that comes with this practice?
Definitely. I mean,
does it get deeper over time? I mean,
definitely. It comes with that realization that any limitations in your life are only there because you put them there. And so
any limitations in your life are only there because you put them there.
100%.
That's interesting.
So if you're not feeling free in some capacity, it's because you're not being free. And so we have to live our life, live our truths, you know. So if you live an unhappy life, if you're unhappy with your job, then you have every choice to find a new job. might take time, and you might have to put up with it and be happy for a short amount of time, but eventually you can find the right fit and whatever works, to find the right
Definitely.
solution.
But do you believe something that, like, even in a jail cell, you can find freedom, through practice, so to speak?
That's a tough one. I know people that have found Jesus there. I heard.
Okay. That could be freedom, depending.
But yeah, definitely, it's it's what state of mind are you living in?
Mm-hmm.
Are you free in here and in here?
Does the practice for you like evolve that way in terms of like, noticing when you're sort of caught up, and are you, not just when you're teaching, right, and also practicing, but in between, are you playing? I'm trying to get a little deep here just for fun.
For sure, you have to remember that we're still human. So even if I've meditated,
you still choke out your girlfriend occasionally?
No, don't go that far.
Just kidding.
So I actually, we're still human. So we have emotions, and
right.
People ask me like, Jahmaal, do you get angry?
Yeah.
And so it's not a question of it's not a question of not getting angry or not, but it's how long does it take for me to come back? So I joke, I tell people, yeah, but it takes me only 3 breaths to come back to a level-headed state where I can just breathe 3 times, and then we're back to normal. I'm processing things normally without any judgment, without my own biases. And so for different people, that can take a different amount of, any amount of time. For some people, little things like little road rage can bother them for the whole day or the whole week. And so for me,
for some people can be even longer than that.
Right.
They hold on to resentments and slights.
Right. And so, yes, it can be in relationships, it can be anywhere in our lives. And so for me, it's easy for me to readjust and move past things. And so I think that's the real value there. It's not that I never encounter these feelings.
No,
in
of
the
course.
first
And
place.
like I'm a psychologist and a sports psychologist. I know, intuitively that, just because you're on the journey and in the practice doesn't, there's no such thing as perfection or anything.
Right.
You're experiencing the same emotions everybody else is. What you're doing is learning how to bring yourself back to the present sooner. You're handling things in a healthier way in general, right? Now, what happens like when other people around you don't handle things well is that's also part of the practice, right? Is to notice the tendency to get impatient and then breathe and meditate and practice mindful. I do all this myself, so it's not like I'm not doing yoga every day, but I do, I work on this. It's something you work on, right?
Yeah, it's practice. I mean, I have a lot of patience, but it's not infinite. So we do what we can. I'm a born teacher. I try to show people a better way. If people are kind of beating themselves up about something that they don't need to, we can show them a different perspective. See if we can shift
I
their
like
mind.
that concept that I'm a born teacher, because I feel similar. I do. I actually feel like I'm, wired that way. It's like I'm here to teach on this life's journey. Like, when did you discover that in you? When did you start to figure out that, that's just part of who you are? You're a teacher.
That's a tough one. In retrospect, it started when I was probably around 12 years old, but as it was happening, maybe around 16, when I started realizing, oh, I'm a good teacher.
It started around age 12, and it's around 16 where you started really recognizing it. So when you look back, you were like helping some of your friends, like in ways that were teacher oriented.
Most of the time helping adults, so helping people, more than 2 or 3 times my age with all kinds of things.
Was it, and when did you begin the yoga practice? How old were you when you began?
6 years old.
6 years old?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Wow.
So I've been practicing for over 20 years.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Who taught you at age 6 to do yoga?
Part of it was just divine. I would sit in meditation and just meditate.
Who taught you to meditate when you were 6 years old? Because I've taught little kids how to meditate. I've taught 6, 7, 8-year-olds how to meditate, but
I didn't have anyone.
A lot of people, you just kind of discovered that on your own.
Yeah, like I want to say TV, but it's not even. I didn't even watch TV when I was that little. I would just sit. It just came to me, and then my mom worked in a spa, and they had yoga classes, and I'd take yoga classes with all the older ladies in Boca, and so I'd be the
older ladies in Boca. That's funny.
So I'd be the little guy in the class, and I practice yoga from there. But I started meditating on my own and just kind of grew from there.
I love it. I love it because, like, what's funny is I lived in Westport, Connecticut, which is the burbs of Fairfield County. And when I was doing yoga, like in my late 20s, when I came back from grad school in San Diego, I would often say it was me back then, because this was 20 something years ago. It'd be me and either moms or pregnant moms. And that was like the only male. Now it's pretty common for males to do yoga, but not 25 years ago. It really wasn't that common. And I was doing a lot of it then because, like you say, it was so helpful for body, mind, spirit, especially when you're working with people. If you're helping people, especially, you need to be on top of your game emotionally, right? Spiritually and emotionally. Otherwise you've got that sort of wounded healer concept going.
And if you're an athlete that you're in tune with your body, you're gonna notice the different changes mentally and physically. You don't have to be told by anyone.
Totally. Have you ever had any I've had a lot of injuries. Have you ever had a serious injury that you used the yoga to sort of help you, work it through? You've been sort of scot-free in this lifetime so far. I find that so amazing.
I've
been creamed so many times.
I'm thinking of like broken bones or fractured. Nothing really. I've fallen a couple of times. Well, a lot of times on my knees from skateboarding and bike riding. Yeah. But my mobility comes back. I'll get pain when it's cold. When the weather changes a little bit, I feel some knee pain. Other than that.
Yeah, that's pretty fortunate, because one of the things I've found is that, because I've had a couple serious injuries where I had years of chronic pain, and one of the things that I found is that pain there's a physical component to it, and there's sort of a mental, emotional component to it. Yeah. And when when you're emotionally in a good place, even the background pain, even if it's a lot, it's so much easier to handle than when you're like emotions are messed up. When you're tired or depressed, it's hard to handle pain.
Oh, big time.
Is that something that is part of your spiritual practice, though? Is like learning how to help other people manage things like pain? Have you had experience helping people with? Yeah,
and it naturally comes up with what I do, but a part of what we have to realize is that anything physical, everything's telling us a story. Any kind of stimuli, any kind of physical movement, particle, anything in our body that's going on, it's telling us a story. So when we have pain in our body, that's telling us a story, and that could be the story of how you received. Could be the story of just how you received the injury, but there could be trauma and a lot that goes behind that as well.
Gotcha. And have you used the yoga practice to help people release trauma? How tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah,
I know you do the bowls, right? The healing bowls. He has these Tibetan bowls that he uses for singing bowls that he uses for healing. I mean, they're pretty amazing, right? But in terms of the yoga practice, have you done a lot of that, working on trauma with people?
Yeah, definitely. Anytime you can get into those deeper tissues and you can hold postures for longer periods of time and get into your connective tissues, you start to release some of that linked trauma with the injury or with the physical pain.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that trauma can be generational as well? I mean, it's just sort of...
Yeah. Trauma can go through generations. It can go through cultures. It can go through...
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, it's sort of fascinating.
So many different levels.
What are you curious about? We got my wife here, so we're going to wrap up in a second. But is there anything that you want me to ask, or you're curious about in terms of asking me before we wrap up?
What got you into the mental game? And
what got me into the mental game? It was like I often say, it's been a tough journey. I like when I'm an identical twin, and I playfully say that my twin is like a triple alpha. Like it's like being married to a 5-star general without the sex. You know what I mean, so to speak. Like so that we have a pretty tight bond. I call it primordial. But it's never been easy when you're an identical twin. Some twin relationships are really close and others are really not close. It can go either way. But my twin was like, Wall Street, triple alpha, hyper competitor, all the stereotypes you can ever imagine. I've had like, thousands of fights, and like, it's crazy how many times I like, have had to fight just because I didn't want to roll over. I could say it 10% of the time, but my brother was super aggressive. And we also grew up in a town back then in the 70s that was pretty anti-Semitic in a general way. And so it was not fun. I mean, so I went through a lot of suffering as a kid, a lot of years where we weren't, I say we because of my brother probably, we never talked about it. He wasn't happy either. And our father was difficult. He wasn't a communicator. So, and that's a really sweet way of saying it. Like he literally couldn't figure it out at all. So there's this sort of triple whammy of like the intensity of my childhood. And I feel like I remember getting into this fight with a kid that tried to beat me up because I was a Jew or whatever it was back then. It was pretty not fun. Oh, and, I decided at 12 years old, I can remember making this decision, age 12, I can remember making this decision that like fighting didn't make sense, but I wanted to sort of figure it out, like why we were here, what this thing is about. And I think psychology was a pretty good fit that way. I've always been sort of wired to make a difference. It's just, like you talk about wiring, I'm like a teacher type. So I'm wired that way. I love making a difference. It's sort of part of who I am. It just is. And then the sort of, unhappiness as a kid made me sort of a little bit deeper or whatever. And and maybe there's some soul level stuff that we can't prove, but maybe that's a part of the mix.
Do you naturally have a lot of self-inquiry?
I mean, I've always been curious, like whether it's myself or other, like why, what motivates people. I'm curious interpersonally. I ask questions about ethnicity. I think maybe I asked you the first time we met, what's your ethnic background? People get scared of questions like that, but I find it so fascinating because culture tells you a lot about who you are in a cool way, in a deep way, right? You learn so much through culture. So, I think I've always been sort of curious and interested. And one of the things I like to teach people is to take a genuine interest in others. And what I've found on this planet is that that's not always that common.
A lot of people, and I find that especially in the US, like people are very closed off to culture. They enjoy their ways, like how people are always like, oh, America's the best, and they don't even care to go look and experience another country to see what it's like to live there.
Oh, totally. I mean, we talk about this a lot about, one of the things I do is I coach these kids, a lot of these adolescents and college kids to go live internationally. My argument is if you spend, 6 months or a year abroad, it's probably more effective than 3 or 4 years in the States.
Oh, 100%. You'd learn more in 6 months than 3 years in college.
Totally.
Sure.
Or 2 months in China. Where no one spoke English. I did that once. That's really not easy. That's a tough one. Especially when you're China's an adult. I lived in Thailand once too, and that was so much easier. I mean, it was just what we call Farang friendly. Farang means white Westerner or foreigner, right? So it was just so much more friendly to than when I lived in China. It was just difficult.
Yeah, China. It's like here. They're like, and it's not cute. They're like, you're here, why don't you speak our language, kind of thing, just like how Americans are.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
I mean,
in Thailand you have fun and it's kind of cute, and
and people speak a little more English, or they're just more receptive, or like where I lived in Beijing, was just difficult because nobody was almost no one spoke any English, and they were it wasn't like they weren't friendly or curious in some way, but Chinese is such a difficult language. When you try to speak Chinese, you're saying things that are rude and you don't even mean to. So they laugh at you, whether it's intentional, probably not even intentional, but it's really uncomfortable. It's like, you're trying to speak a language and it's a little bit like the stereotypes of France that way. You know, it's like, you know, certain cultures like are
open.
more, certain cultures are more forgiving, right?
Yeah.
I always found Thailand very forgiving.
Yeah,
So
it is.
can't wait to get back. This COVID thing's got everything. It's got us travelers, like those of us that love to travel. It's got us a little bit locked down, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
It's tough.
thank you. I really
Thanks.
appreciate
This
it.
was good. Yeah.
All right, great stuff. Good to see you. Welcome back to Open Door with Dr. Brett.